Welcome to Narrative Strokes. I had been up there for 23 days. The lighthouse sat on a narrow outcrop, maybe half a mile of land, surrounded by sea on every side. You couldn't see it from shore unless you knew where to look. There was a single path, gravel mostly, and a supply boat that came by every 2 weeks. They had said it'd be quiet work. Keep the lens turning, monitor the instruments, send in reports. Sounded like what I needed. And for the most part, it had been. I woke up around 6, checked the tide markers, cleaned the lens if it needed it, and made sure the backup generator wasn't rattling itself loose again. I heated up something from a can. I logged my notes. I didn't talk much. There was no one there to talk to, and that was fine. I had brought 2 books with me, and I hadn't opened either. Hadn't felt like it. The sea was loud when it wanted to be, but mostly it just moved around out there. You didn't notice how much space water took up until you were surrounded by it. Every direction, it was just movement and cold and wet. I had stopped trying to take pictures. They never came out right. Just gray or blue, nothing to hold on to. The nights were the worst. I used to think darkness was the problem, but it wasn't. It was the in-between, the hours between midnight and 5. Too late to stay awake, too early to pretend it was morning. That was when my mind wandered, started making things up. Like that night, I woke up because I thought someone was knocking on the lighthouse door. Not banging, just a soft knock. 3 times. I lay there, holding my breath, listening. It didn't come again. The next morning, I went down and checked. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of anything disturbed. Just the usual sea spray on the steps and a dead crab on the walkway. Could have been the wind, or the pipes, or a dream. But it hadn't felt like a dream. The first weird thing I found was a sock. Small, pink. Kid size, maybe. It was soaked and half buried in the rocks below the cliffside path. I almost didn't see it, but the color stood out. I picked it up with 2 fingers and tossed it aside. No kids came out there. No people, really. Maybe it fell off a boat. Maybe it got stuck in a gull's beak and dropped. There was always a reason for things if you looked hard enough. Still, it looked familiar. Not in a spooky way, just that plain, everyday kind of familiar, like something I'd watched 100 times before. Anyway, I didn't think much of it at the time. But then that night, the knocking came again. Softer and closer. And that time, I heard something after. A kind of gurgling sound. It wasn't mechanical, nor was it the wind. It reminded me of a child trying to say something underwater. Which didn't make any sense. I didn't check the door. I just waited it out, tried to fall asleep. Eventually I did. I had a dream where I was swimming. That part wasn't strange, but in the dream, someone was pulling on my shirt from below. I woke up choking on nothing. I didn't mention the dream in the logbook. I wrote down wind speed, visibility, and the usual. Left out the part where I sat on the edge of my bunk for half an hour, coughing and staring at my hands like they didn't belong to me. The next day passed like they always did, slow. I checked the light and the oil. I listened to the radio, even though there was never anything on it but static. and the automated beacon ping from the Coast Guard. That static had been sounding a little different lately. Sometimes it cut in and out, and I swore I heard something underneath. Not words exactly, but something like a tone. I knew that sounded crazy. I even laughed when I first thought it. The sea was trying to talk to me, like some over-dramatic journal entry. But later, I wasn't so sure it was funny. A few days before, I was rinsing out a metal pot by the rocks, and I looked down and saw something floating in the shallows. At first, I thought it was a piece of driftwood, but when I got closer, I saw it was shaped more like a leg. Not full, just from the knee down. It was swollen, gray, with bits of seaweed tangled around it, and the toes were all there. It was fake, obviously. Had to be. Rubber or silicone. Maybe a prop from a fishing boat prank. I didn't touch it. I backed away, went inside, and locked the door. When I checked again an hour later, it was gone. I didn't report it. What would I even say? Hey, I saw a fake leg and now it's missing? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd come check on me. I didn't want them to do that. I needed to be there. I needed to see it through. The wind had been picking up. It had been storming on and off the past few nights. I started to hear something strange during the rain. Something in the drain pipes. Not actual words, but the pattern of speech. It went on longer than it should have. I timed it once. 27 seconds. That wasn't normal for runoff. Sometimes I thought I heard my name in it. I hadn't said my name out loud in weeks. Hadn't heard it since the boat dropped me off. The next day I found the sock again. Same one. Pink, soaked, crumpled on the windowsill that time. No explanation for how it got there. The windows were closed. The door was always locked. It looked exactly the same as before, down to the little frayed edge on the heel. I didn't throw it. Instead, I folded it and put it in the drawer under the sink. I didn't know why. It felt wrong to get rid of it. I had been remembering things I didn't ask to remember. Like how her hair used to smell like salt water after we played at the beach. How she'd kick her legs while I carried her on my back. How light she was. How heavy she became when I pulled her out of the water. I hadn't thought about that day in years. Not in detail. But then it was everywhere. In the pipes, in the static, in the knocking that hadn't stopped. It was every night then. The same 3 knocks. Then the gurgling. Sometimes I thought I heard a little laugh. Just one. Soft. Like she used to when she was trying to hide. I wasn't writing that down for anyone but myself. I wasn't crazy. I knew what grief did. I knew what isolation did. I had read the stories about people out there, losing track of time, talking to the walls. But that wasn't that. It couldn't be. I saw her sometimes, just out past the rocks, standing there, neck deep in the surf, watching, still, unmoving, like a statue that shouldn't have been there. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just looked up at the tower, and every time I blinked, she was gone. I'd been skipping meals. Not on purpose. It just happened. I'd realized it was dark out, and I hadn't eaten since morning. The days had started to blur together. I used to mark the calendar in the kitchen, little red X's, but I had stopped sometime last week, or maybe earlier. My sleep was getting worse. I would doze off, and then jerk awake, heart pounding, like I'd forgotten something important. The air always felt damp. My hands were cold even when the fire was going. A few nights ago, I heard footsteps upstairs, just above me. Slow, one at a time. I didn't move. I just lay there listening, eyes wide open. The wood creaked in that way it did when someone tried not to be heard. There was only one bed up there. I hadn't used it since the first week. I slept downstairs, near the generator hum. It helped me keep track of what was real. That's what I told myself. When I went up in the morning, everything looked normal. Blanket still folded, window still shut, but the smell was different. Like mildew and seawater. Like clothes that never fully dried. I should have gone back down. Instead, I stood there and waited. I didn't know for what. I thought I saw her again. Not standing in the water, but sitting by the rocks, knees pulled to her chest. Her head was down. She looked small. I watched her for a long time. Eventually, I went outside, walked toward the cliff. There was nothing there. No footprints, no wet stones. Just sea spray and that steady, dragging wind. When I came back in, the sock was on the floor by the front door. It was dried. I didn't remember bringing it out of the drawer. I didn't remember even opening the drawer. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table with the lamp on and stared at the door. I thought maybe if I stayed awake, whatever was happening would stop. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up with my head on the table and the light burned out. There were 2 wet marks on the floor, like bare feet had stood there and gone again. I touched the spots. They were cold. I didn't write this to scare anyone. I knew how it sounded. I'd gone over every explanation I could think of. The wind, sleep deprivation, stress, leftover grief. All of it made sense on paper. But when you were in it, when you were standing in that dark tower, hearing something breathing where no one should be, it didn't feel like imagination. I was fine. I just needed a few more days. I needed to be sure. I left the sock on the table. I thought about putting it away again, but that felt pointless. It just kept showing up. I sat across from it for an hour, just looking. I thought maybe I'd see it move. It didn't. Still, I couldn't take my eyes off it. Later that day, I went down to check the equipment room. Nothing was wrong or out of place, but the second I opened the door, I got this strong smell. Mold and something else, like old laundry that sat too long in a machine. I checked the walls, the pipes. Everything was dry. The smell faded after a few minutes, but it came back that night. When I went upstairs and opened the bedroom door, it hit my nose. I didn't think I was imagining the smell. It wasn't like a memory. I could taste it in my throat. I moved the mattress down to the base floor. I was not going back up again. The next morning, I found a cup of water on the windowsill. It wasn't mine. I didn't remember putting it there. I didn't even keep cups upstairs. It was filled halfway. When I picked it up, it was warm. It was these kind of things that were hardest to explain, just small things that shouldn't happen. I washed the cup and put it back in the cabinet. A few nights ago, I dreamed she was sitting under the stairs, curled up, arms around her knees. Her face was pale, lips cracked. Her eyes looked at me, but she didn't blink. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Then I woke up. It was the same face every time now. Not as she was, but as she would be if she'd been left too long in the water. I hadn't said her name since I got here, not out loud. I had started setting a second place at the table. I just put the bowl there. It felt like something I should do. If I didn't, I would get this tight feeling in my chest like I'd left something unfinished. I caught myself whispering something while I was cleaning the stairs. I didn't even notice at first, just low, soft words, like reading from a note. When I stopped, I couldn't remember what I was saying. I kept hearing footsteps, always above me, never below. 4 nights ago, I unplugged the radio. I'd been hearing her voice through it. I didn't care if it sounded impossible. It was what happened. I turned the knob and it wasn't static anymore. Just her saying the same thing again and again. Why didn't you come in after me? I didn't answer. I just unplugged it and threw it under the sink. In the morning, it was back on the shelf, plugged in, turned off. I didn't remember touching it though. It was too bright outside that day. The sea was flat, no movement. The air felt too still. I thought I'd go sit by the rocks for a while. It reminded me of her. Just for a little while. Then I'd come back inside. The water was too cold that day. I went to the same place I always stood. I thought if I stayed long enough, she might come back. She didn't. I waited until my legs started to go numb. Then I went back inside. The sock was gone from the table. I didn't move it. I didn't bother looking for it that time. I hadn't written in the logbook in over a week. I opened it, stared at the page, then closed it again. I didn't have anything new to report. It had always been the same then. The wind moved, the sea stayed still, the air tasted like salt. I started folding her clothes. I had brought a few things. I hadn't planned to, but I packed them anyway. A sweater, some pajamas. I didn't know why. I laid them out on the bed upstairs, even though I said I wouldn't go up there again. I didn't feel scared up there that time. It felt quiet. I left the bedroom door open. Later that night, I woke up and the smell was stronger than ever. Damp and sour and thick. I couldn't breathe through my nose. I sat up and checked every corner of the room. Nothing was there, but the clothes were damp. Just slightly, like someone had touched them with wet hands. I sat down on the floor and waited. I didn't know what else to do. After a while, I started talking out loud. "You can come in. It's okay. I'm sorry I didn't jump in. I thought I had time." I didn't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I fell asleep leaning against the wall. That morning, when I went outside, I found something new. On the edge of the dock, lined up side by side, were 4 small seashells. They hadn't been there the day before. They were clean, white, each one the same size, placed neatly. I picked one up. It was warm. I didn't take the others. I left them just how they were. The wind hadn't picked up all day. That wasn't normal. There was no noise from the pipes, no seagulls, no birds at all. It was quiet in a way I hadn't heard before, like everything was waiting. I thought she wanted me to come back. I had been thinking about what it felt like. that moment in the water. How fast everything had moved. 1 second she was laughing, the next she was under. I didn't even realize she'd let go. I remembered jumping in, but it was already too late. I remembered the cold. I wondered if it would feel the same then. Not scary, just cold. I hadn't turned on the light in 2 nights. There was no point. No ships had passed in a while, and I doubted anyone was watching. The last supply boat had been due 3 days ago. I hadn't seen it, hadn't heard it. I hadn't eaten since the morning before. I tried, but it didn't sit right. The smell of the food made me nauseous. I poured it out. I was sleeping less, sitting at the window most of the time, watching the water. I thought maybe I'd feel fear at the end. I didn't. Just tired. The night before, I saw her again. She was closer, right at the edge of the shore that time. Still, looking straight at the tower. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched. And she raised her hand. That was new. Not waving, just raising it, like reaching. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt different, heavy, not cold, but I could feel it in my chest. I walked to the dock, slowly, carefully. The shells were still there, 5 of them then, lined up evenly, edge to edge. The water was calm, flat like glass. I sat at the end of the dock for a while, my feet just above the surface. I didn't hear anything, not the wind, not the sea, just my own breath. When I looked out again, she was gone, but I felt like she was closer, waiting. I went back inside and changed my clothes, sat down and wrote this. The sock is back on the table, wet again. The shells are still outside. I can hear her now. Not through the pipes, not in the radio. From under the water. It's not a scream, not even a word. Just her voice. Like she's trying to ask if I'm coming this time. I think I am. It's quieter under there. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, then comment down below and let me know what you think. I'll see you next time with another story. Until then, keep smiling and don't forget to like and subscribe.